An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. You've definitely heard that one before, right? It sounds like the very definition of ancient, brutal justice. And honestly, for a lot of people, it's proof, Exhibit A, really, that the Bible just copied its laws from older civilizations like Babylon. But is it really that simple? What if the most revolutionary part of this story isn't what the laws say, but how they're written?
All right, so first, let's actually look at the case for copying. Why is this idea so popular? I mean, when you look at the evidence on the surface, it seems pretty overwhelming.
I mean, look at this. The comparison is just startlingly direct. On one side, you have the Code of Hammurabi from Babylon, and on the other, the Book of the Covenant from Exodus. The phrasing is almost a mirror image. Sure, the words are a little different, but that core idea, retribution in kind, it looks exactly the same.
And then here's the real kicker, the timeline. This is really the heart of the whole argument. You've got legal codes from Mesopotamia, like Hammurabi's, that are centuries, even a full millennium, older than the biblical laws. So yeah, it looks like a total open and shut case, right? It seems obvious they just borrowed from the older, more established culture. So yeah, case closed, right? Israel just copied its neighbors. Well, not so fast. What if the most revolutionary thing about these laws has nothing to do with what they say, but everything to do with how they say it? It turns out there's this huge clue that's been hiding in plain sight the whole time, right there in the grammar.
Okay, so now we're going to put these laws under a bit of a grammatical microscope. And trust me, this is where the story gets really interesting.
So to get this, we just need a quick primer on something called syntax. Don't worry, it's simple. It's basically just the blueprint of a sentence, the order of the words. And as we're about to see, a different blueprint can actually reveal a totally different way of seeing the world.
Okay, so in Akkadian, that's the language of Hammurabi's code, the sentence structure usually starts with the subject, the person doing the action. So the law begins with who did the thing. The emphasis is totally on the actor. The starting point is always a man.
But now look at biblical Hebrew. The syntax is often flipped. The verb, the action itself, comes first. So instead of starting with a man stole, the law kicks off with stole. And this is not just some random stylistic thing. It completely shifts the focus of the entire law away from the person who did it and onto the action itself.
So you have an actor-focused law versus an action-focused law. Who versus what? I know, it feels like a really tiny grammatical detail, right? But what if that tiny little shift is actually the key that unlocks a completely different vision for justice, for society, even for the value of a human life?
All right, let's actually connect the dots between that grammar difference and the values that are hidden inside these legal systems. Because think about it. When your laws are all about the actor, it suddenly becomes really, really important who that actor is.
And this is exactly why that actor-first grammar mattered so much in Babylon. Their society was super rigid, split into 3 classes. You had the Awilim, basically the elite landowners, then the Mushkinim, who were free but lower class, and at the bottom, the Wardam Amtum, or slaves. The law you got depended entirely on which of these boxes you fit into.
And here's what that looks like in practice. According to Hammurabi's code, if a nobleman hits another nobleman, okay, he pays a fine. But if that same nobleman hits someone from a higher class, the punishment is a brutal public whipping. We're talking the same crime, but because the who is different, the punishment is worlds apart.
This chart just lays it all out, plain and simple. In Mesopotamia, if you stole property, say an ox, that could get you the death penalty. But kidnapping a person, that was just a fine. The biblical law flips this whole thing on its head. Steal property, you repay with property. But a crime against a person, like kidnapping, that gets the ultimate penalty. The value system couldn't be clearer. People matter more than property, period.
So by shifting the focus to the action, not the actor, the Israelite law was making an absolutely radical statement for its time. It was the crime that mattered, not who you were. Not your social status, not whether you were rich or poor, and that created this foundation for equality that it was unheard of in the ancient world.
Okay, so now that we have all this context, the grammar, the class system, the totally different values, we can finally circle back to that famous phrase, an eye for an eye, and see it in a whole new light.
So, was it really a command for this endless, brutal cycle of revenge? Was it a literal order to go out and physically take someone's eye? Well, the evidence suggests its real purpose was something completely different.
See, instead of being a command to retaliate, eye for an eye was actually a guiding principle of justice. Think of it as a ceiling on punishment, not a floor.
It was meant to stop these escalating blood feuds where one act of revenge leads to another. And even more importantly, it was a warning to the powerful. Don't you dare go too far when you're dealing with the weak.
And the law itself shows us exactly how this works. Right after it lays out the eye for an eye principle, it gives this super specific example. If a master hits his slave and knocks out the slave's eye, the slave goes free. See? The point isn't to take the master's eye. The point is to deliver justice and freedom to the person who had no power.
And then, centuries later, this whole idea of restraint gets taken even further. Jesus actually quotes this exact principle, and he pushes its inner logic to the absolute limit, saying, let's not just limit retaliation, let's replace it altogether with mercy.
So, where does all this leave us? Well, it's pretty clear we're not just looking at a simple case of copying. It's something way more thoughtful, way more intentional than that.
Yeah, that whole idea of a simple copy-paste job from Babylon, it doesn't hold up when you look closer. What we're actually seeing is a deliberate and frankly revolutionary adaptation of the legal ideas that were floating around back then.
Think of it like this. The biblical writers took these legal formats that everybody in their world would have recognized. They looked at them, decoded the values hiding underneath, the focus on social class and property, and then they recoded them with a totally new set of values, all centered on human dignity, equality, and the value of every single life.
They weren't just writing rules to keep the powerful on top. No way. They were actually using the language of law to paint a picture of a different kind of world, a society that was supposed to reflect God's justice, not just the king's power.
And that kind of leaves us with a big question to chew on, doesn't it? If the grammar of ancient laws can tell us so much about what a society truly valued, what about our laws today? What hidden values are encoded in the legal systems that shape our world? What do they really say about us and what we prioritize most?